As a first question, how important is the academic work in education?
Okay. Academic work is given its importance in the spirit of prophecy within a certain context. It is important when it is able to be practically applied in the life. So, for example, our students should learn math for the purpose of keeping their accounts, managing their finances. This is practical. How many learn to manage their finances in school? I didn't think so. But we need to. Right? So that's the correct application of an academic subject. Has anyone ever been building a house or any type of construction and used the Pythagorean theorem? Anyone? Okay. Yeah. Again, that's a practical application. Geography. We are told that it should be studied in the light of missionary effort, how we can reach other nations for the gospel. History, we're told, should be studied in the context of God's dealing with his people.
Amen.
Science. Who's the author of true science? God himself, right? Artyom. You use a lot of science in your work, don't you? Of course. And that's a beautiful example of applying an academic subject in its true context. But the key is that we're not studying it, throughout the teenage years with no application. We just tell the student, well, someday you'll use that. It needs to be actually applied in their life so that they understand how it's going to be used.
The reason I ask this is because I can see a danger laying here. Because as far as I studied, this word akademos comes from Greek, and it has pagan origins. In other words, in Akademos Gardens, Platon was the one who was talking about his ideas. And I can see that Satan is playing his cards here, and I'm worried about this subject. To me, academics is more like university, college, and is linked with other subjects besides math and science. It has much more to do with culture. And I see many parents now worried that their children will not reach academic levels, and they're not worried that will not reach what God is saying. This is the tendency that if our children are not academically ready, just like the ones in public schools, that means that they are dumb. And that's why I'm asking, is it important to continue to lay on this subject of academics, or is it important to do what God calls us to do? What's the line between these two?
It's a very good question, very good analysis. So 150% we want to follow what the Lord wants us to do, right? And so we need to identify, okay, what is it that the Lord calls us to do? And we don't need to do any more than that. Now, I understand in what you're saying, there are sort of two different definitions of academics. So in one sense, you have what you're saying of academia, we might say in English, I don't know which is, like you say, the culture of academics. It's the exaltation, what I talked about yesterday morning, it's the exaltation of the mind and man's wisdom above the wisdom of God. And that is, it's what Plato said. There's the science of all sciences, the intellect discerning between the true and the false. And that is most definitely of Greek origins, as you've said, and is not what God is calling his people into. However, there's another definition of academics, and perhaps it's incorrect. Perhaps we're using the wrong word, but it's the word we use. And that is the learning of practical scientific subjects that will help us in everyday life. And many times we call that academics. We should invent another word. God does call us to learn those things because, as I've said, those are necessary to practical life. They are actually invented by God himself. He's the author of true science, and they fit us to be better missionaries. So, to clarify, I'm not saying, as some want to say, well, I want to enter the culture of academia, I'm going to get my PhD, that will give me better influence. I'm not saying that. I'm not using that definition of the word academics. When I'm saying academics, I'm referring to those practical things which are good for everyone to learn. And that is part of God's design. And I think I'm thinking of two other things on this topic. One is that we focus so much, especially in schooling, on giving children all the information that they need. And we have this idea that we're going to give children all the information they need for life. And when you really stop and think about that, that's crazy. That's impossible. So rather than focusing on the information, we need to focus on teaching them how to learn, how to reach a problem or something that they don't know later in life and say, okay, I'll figure this out. And if they, along with the connection with the Lord, if they have a connection with God and they know how to learn, they're prepared. That's the best preparation we can give them. I was recently reading a book by Corrie ten Boom. It was about her early years in her family. And she spoke about her father. Her father was an incredible student in the Bible, a man of thought and wisdom, who did not pass a day without being connected with God. And over time, their family was in pretty high culture. Her father became very well known, and they had a group of men who would come to their house every week, including a couple of some of the greatest philosophers of the day. I don't remember the names, but probably you might even recognize a name. And they would come and meet together. They had the highest degrees the world could offer. They were renowned in their field, and they would come and talk with Corrie ten Boom's father, who had no degree. He merely studied his Bible. And they could not give him a question that he could not answer. They were amazed at his wisdom. Where did he get it from? It comes from the Lord. If we connect our children with the Lord, that is the most important. Amen. Okay.
Amen.
Other questions?
Who are the most important to be taught, the parents or the children?
Well, to refer from my presentation on Sabbath, if we look at in the book Education, in the children of Israel, it says that when they were called out of Egypt, they were not prepared to educate their children. And that represents being called out of bondage to sin. So, as we've been called out of sin, we are not prepared either. And so, it says that the parents themselves had to be educated. And this was what the whole purpose of that time in the wilderness was. And we can't really ask what is most important, but we can ask which one needs to come first. And most certainly it's the parents who has to come first. Because the mindset has to be changed to be able to impart true education.
Deoarece gândirea trebuie să fie schimbată pentru a putea să ofere educația adevărată.
Mm-hmm.